After a long day of city errands, Ratnachacha, Keshav, Bola, and Jagu were focused on one thing: getting home. They were exhausted, carrying the weight of a full day's work and the quiet hope that they hadn't missed the last connection. When they finally reached Madhopur station, it was 1 a.m. The platform was completely empty, illuminated only by the harsh yellow glow of overhead lights. The silence was suddenly broken by the low, distant rumble of an approaching engine. For a moment, it seemed like their luck had held out, but that hope disappeared as a high-speed express blurred past the platform. It didn't slow down, leaving nothing behind but a cloud of dust and the lingering vibration of the tracks. Then came the announcement over the crackling speaker. The local passenger train to Chandanpur was cancelled for track repairs. No more trains were coming. With no other way to reach their village, the four men were stuck. They had no choice but to settle onto the benches and wait for the first morning train at 5 a.m. This simple logistical delay had stripped away their ability to leave. In the middle of the night, the familiar environment of a train station became a place where they were suddenly and completely on their own. As the men started to drift into a light sleep, a figure appeared at the far end of the platform. It was an old man in a faded cap, emerging silently from the shadows. He walked toward them with a slow, steady gait and asked a question that seemed perfectly normal for a passenger. "When is the train to Ramnagar coming?" The group looked at each other in confusion. Ramnagar station hadn't seen a train in years. The entire line had been decommissioned and the station boarded up. To show he was ready for the journey, the old man pulled a small, creased paper from his pocket and held it out. This timeline visualizes the disconnect. The men lived in the present, but the ticket's date belonged to a track that stopped cold 20 years ago. It marks a local tragedy. A passenger train derailed and never reached its destination. Looking at that ticket, the men faced a physical impossibility. This wasn't a simple mistake. It was a piece of the past sitting in the palm of a hand, suggesting that the logic of the station had started to unravel. The old man didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked back toward the dark end of the platform, leaving the four men to sit in a tense, uncomfortable silence. Eventually, the thirst and nerves became too much. Ratnachacha and Jagu walked to a solitary water tap in a dark corner of the platform. But as they approached the tap, they saw a familiar shape. The old man was already there, standing perfectly still in the dim light. When he turned his head toward them, the movement was stiff and mechanical. In the flickering light, they saw the injuries, severe, deep trauma to his face that no living person could have survived. He didn't seem to notice his own condition. He didn't scream or move to attack. He simply spoke again, repeating the same question about the Ramnagar train, in a voice that lacked any emotion. This interaction suggests something more tragic than a typical haunting. The figure doesn't seem to see the men. He is simply repeating the final mundane task of a life that was cut short 20 years ago. The two men ran back to the others, and for the next few hours, the group sat huddled together. They didn't speak. They just watched the shadows at the edge of the yellow light, waiting for the sun to rise. The first light of morning finally hit the tracks, accompanied by the welcome sound of the 5 a.m. train. They boarded the train and left Madhopur behind. They eventually reached their village and returned to their routines, but the memory of that ticket and the figure at the tap would stay with them long after the night ended. It raises the question, why did they see him? There was no warning and no reason. They were simply there when the environment changed. Consider these two circles. One represents the living, experiencing a temporary delay. The other represents a history of trauma, anchored to an unfulfilled goal. By waiting exactly where that journey ended 2 decades ago, the men stood in a collision between the present and a moment that refuses to finish. It serves as a reminder that a canceled train can cost you more than just a few hours of sleep. If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you might find yourself sharing a platform with someone whose journey ended a long time ago.